All right. Archive 4, page 111 Secrets of God in Egypt. What the scholars have buried in Syria. Because the Giza complex is in Egypt, it is logical to assume that the Egyptians long ago knew more about the origin and purpose of these monuments more than any other people. Unfortunately, the most ardent enemy against new thinking and reinterpretation of the earliest records from Egypt concerning the Great Pyramid are the Egyptologists. This school of historians and scholars are bent on making all believe that Giza is a cultural relic of Egypt's past of the Golden Age period of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaura, all early dynastic rulers known better by their Grecian names, Cheops, Chephren, and Mycerinus. To these men who have vested interest in having the world believe in the Egyptocentric origin of the Giza monuments, it is absolute blasphemy for them to even consider the possibility that the pyramids were not built to house the dead bodies of pharaohs. Over the last few decades, researchers have attacked the pyramid tomb theory. These writers are responsible for the rift between the Egyptologists and the wide readership throughout the world that holds that the pyramids could not have been built as tombs. Just as unrelenting as the Egyptian scholarship, these renegade researchers and fringe archaeologists are too obstinate to even allow for any other interpretations but their own, not considering that the purpose of the Great Pyramid could be multifaceted, with one aspect being the representation of an empty tomb. One, as revealed earlier, that was specifically designed not to hold the remains of a body. One of the battlegrounds between the two differing vantage points concerns the Valley of the Kings. It is hundreds of miles south of Giza and second to the Great Pyramid and Sphinx in popularity. The Valley of the Kings is a royal burial site riddled with tombs, crypts, secret vaults, hidden entrances, and deeply concealed subterranean complexes that were once filled with provisions for a pharaoh's journey into the afterlife. Early Egyptologists theorized that the valley became a burial site of their kings in late antiquity because it could not possibly account for all the regents of Egypt's past. In order to continue their efforts to prove that Egypt was truly over 1,000 years older than the other traditional civilizations of the mid-second millennium BC. Egyptologists then had to assume that the earliest burials before the valley must have been within the pyramids. This teaching is propagated extensively when the fact there has never been excavated any royal remains from any pyramid in Egypt. Some earlier historians even attempted to place the mummified remains of long-dead commoners inside the monuments for others to discover, but these feeble attempts were never persuasive, and usually evidence was found to prove the deception. The pyramid tomb theory was simply invoked to explain away the lack of truly ancient burials at the Valley of the Kings site. The evidence taken from the valley concerning the pharaohs that were interred there suggests that Egypt is no older than Babylonia, Sumner, Mitanni, Elam, Anatolia, or other approximately 4,400-year-old civilizations. Egyptian history has largely been molded upon a foundation that lacks authority, ideas born to fill an apparent void rather than based upon truly existing facts or evidence. Anthropology and archaeology as a whole do not support an Egyptian presence beyond 2500 BC. Egypt's great age is only attested to in Egyptian mythology and records of late Grecian antiquity. No other national archives from the Old World support their claims to high antiquity. Such collaboration should have been found somewhere, perhaps in the thousands of ancient stone writings of Ashurbanipal's library, the Sumerian Library of Nippur, the Canaanite Ras Shamra Library, or archaic tablets of the Ebla Library, the Armana documents of Egypt, or even the biblical records. Even the pyramid text and Edfu inscriptions speak of a civilization predating Egypt, curious writings that will later be detailed in this archive. Nowhere is Egypt's claim to high antiquity validated. One of the world's most undisputed authorities of Greek mythology and researcher of the world's oldest theological systems is Robert Graves, who, in his epic work entitled The White Goddess, wrote, Egyptian texts and pictorial records are notorious for their suppression and or distortion of popular beliefs. 1. This is seen clearly in that the scholars today claim that Egypt's dynasties stretch back to 3150 BC to what they termed the early dynastic period, which lasted to about 2686 BC. The problem they confront is that the burials at the Valley of the Kings merely date back to the Middle Kingdom, ca. 2040 to 1780 BC, beginning with Tutmos I. 2. The historians had no choice but to create an old kingdom that buried their kings in pyramids, which is nothing but good old scholarly fiction based off zero evidence. As we will later see in this work, the first so-called dynasties of Egypt were actually borrowed, these records mirroring the earliest dynasties of other Near Eastern cultures. Egypt can only truly claim that it is but a part of to a whole, sharing a common origin traced back to a single elder civilization. Egypt's great age is made more dubious by some other important facts. First, there are no known liturgies revealing life beyond the grave until the end of the Old Kingdom, about 2155 BC. 3. This is not as it should be. Assuming Egypt is as old as they claim and at a highly developed state of civilization as to have erected the Gizan monuments, then liturgies should be discovered everywhere. Is this not controversial? Is this not hypocrisy to state on the one hand that a culture could have built a monument the size and precision of the Great Pyramid for the purpose of burying a ruler and preparing him for his afterlife journey, while also knowing on the other hand that there existed no writings in ancient Egypt at that time depicting a belief in life after death? Part of the confusion was specifically introduced by the scholars of Egyptology at a rather insignificant pyramid attributed to Unas, an early Egyptian ruler, were discovered that what have become popularly known as the pyramid text. This pyramid is at Saqqara near Giza in Lower Egypt. These pyramid texts have absolutely nothing to do with the Giza monuments. Because the pyramid of Unas is far inferior to those of Giza, the historians and archaeologists automatically claim that Unas ruled before any of the Giza pyramid builders, basing their conjecture upon the premise that the pyramid building art followed an evolutionary path from small and inferior to colossal edifice of the Great Pyramids itself. What is truly curious, if not outright suspicious, is why Egyptologists do not comment on why the Great Pyramid and its adjuncts do not have inferior inscriptions or hieroglyphs. In fact, no writings have been found within the Giza complex pyramids. 4. The real irony is that we are told that Egypt's dynasties are based upon fact. However, it is a fact that Egypt's history was never recorded as a series of consecutive events measured out linearly as we have with the present Gregorian calendar or older Julian calendar. In Egypt, each calendar began with the reign of a new pharaoh after the death of the earlier ruler. 5. The records of the Hebrews do not support Egypt's claims either. In the Book of Jasher, writings of Jubilees, the various testaments of the patriarchs, the Torah, Midrashic, and Talmudic writings, there is no reference at all to the burying of Egyptian pharaohs in pyramids. This is a startling fact due to the historic ties these people had with Egypt, ancient Egypt. In the Testament of Simon, we learn that at his death he was put in a coffin with the bones of Joseph, which were in the tombs of the kings in Egypt. These tombs were religiously guarded by the Egyptians. 6. All of the patriarchs that died in Egypt were buried in the tombs of the kings of Egypt because Joseph was highly venerated by the Egyptians, having virtually become one of their greatest rulers, second only to Pharaoh. According to the Book of Jasher, the surviving Hebrews in Moses' time were commanded to take these bodies out of the tombs and carry them with them from Egypt to Canaan to bury them with their forefathers at the city of Hebron. This leads to a very interesting fact concerning Egypt's claims to high antiquity. Hebron was anciently called Kirjatharaba in the days before the Israeli occupation of Canaan, named after a legendary patriarch of the Anakim giants who was named Arba, the father of Anak. In the book of Numbers, we learned that the Egyptian city of Zon was built 7 years after Hebron in Canaan. This statement has baffled scholars for centuries because it has nothing to do with the text. Biblical Zon has identified by Egyptologists as the city of Tanis, and this intriguing statement was most likely inserted into the text because even in those early centuries after the construction of Hebron in the days of Abraham's fathers, it was a prevalent teaching among the Egyptians that they were older than their contemporaries, and ancientness the author of Numbers sought to show was untrue. The Hebrew records clearly detail how the cities of Canaan were built first. Then Egypt was occupied by 7 nations, all kin to each other, that in the 19th century participated in a war for the Nile regions. The people of Kemet won out, successfully ousting cultures that later came to occupy Philistia, Crete, Libya, Nubia, and many areas of the Aegean. One of the oldest surviving records concerning this early conflict is found in the writings of Flavius Josephus in his notes on the Ethiopic War. Also, we find remnant traditions of this olden war in the fragmented Grecian myths. Probably the most profound enigma is how the scholars have so adamantly, without any debate or peer refutation, portrayed the Great Pyramid as being the intended tomb of a pharaoh Cheops. The actual stele of Cheops claims there was already a pyramid at the Giza site prior to his own reign. 7. Incredibly, though this is supposed to be the largest tomb in the world, historians claim that Cheops feared that his own people would desecrate his pyramid and burial site because they were discontented with his reign, so he was secretly buried in an elaborately cut sepulchre 1,000 feet away. 8. This is a ridiculous notion, and to think it is actually passed off as serious scholarly consideration. A pyramid the size and majesty of the Great Pyramid was built by a culture that hated its ruler, and this regent was then buried in a lesser construction nearby because he feared his tomb would be desecrated and his remains forever lost before they could be granted access to the afterlife. Preposterous. A hypothesis completely built from a vague reference in Herodotus' writings that claimed that the Egyptian people so completely hated Cheops and Khephren that they will not even mention their names. One must be invested with a tremendous amount of blind faith to accept the idea that Cheops or Khephren had anything at all to do with these monuments. Despite the efforts of modern scholars, redactionist historians, and archaeologists and their united effort to bury the truth in Syriad, there stands today a quiet artifact from the ancient world from before the deluge that cannot be buried or concealed. There stands a guardian at Giza that protects over the secret purpose of the Great Pyramid.